podcast is part of the Sports Social Podcast Network.
Hello everyone, I'm Chris Wynn. Welcome to How Are the podcast, and hopefully you joined us for part one of our first Euro Q&A. And if not, you might want to listen to that first before we reference some of the nonsense that we talked about on that, as we get into a lot of transfer-centric question that lots of you sent in to us, because I think that is the biggest topic that people want to talk about at the moment. What's next and what do we need? I think there's a little bit of panic now setting in that we've got that after this celebration subsided, people are going, oh God, we've got these extra games. What do we need? And what level of player are we going to bring in? So we've got a huge amount of questions coming in based on that. So we'll get into it because obviously it's going to be something that we're going to be talking about a lot over the coming days and weeks. And first up, I have Martin Wanless with us. Hello, Martin.
Hello, mate. Yes, I've got my binoculars out. I've been scouting players, so we're good to go. Or spying on the opposition.
You mentioned
whichever you want to do.
Well, don't say that. We'll get put down to the championship or something like that if you start talking like that. We'll be investigated. Yeah, you did say you look back in part one. You look back at some of the conversations last summer. Is that going to be a completely different conversation?
The conversation that we had last summer compared to this?
Yeah.
Naturally, I think it is, because we've got a real sense now of what the quality of the Premier League is like. Because look, we've been away from it for 9 years, and I don't know about you, but I certainly wasn't glued to watching Premier League football every weekend while we were out of it. I was watching Championship football or League One football, watching teams that we were competing against rather than the teams that we were miles away from at the time. So I think collectively we've got a much better grasp on the quality of the Premier League. We've got a much better grasp on where the playing squad is against that quality. We've got completely different expectations now, haven't we? Because we've got 3 promoted clubs coming up. We've stayed up comfortably. We've seen we were all surprised, weren't we, about the quality of the players that we were able to bring in last summer. And of course, we've got Europe to bring into the conversation now, haven't we? So there's all sorts of different strands to it. I think we're having probably more informed conversations this year, I would hope, rather than speculative, because we can see we've got a better idea of what we need. Whereas last season, if we go back to the start of last pre-season, we were talking about who's going to partner Dan Neil in centre midfield. Who's going to be understudy to Isidore? How will Anthony Patterson make the step up? So we were taken completely by surprise at the approach that the club took, weren't we? So it's a whole different conversation. Look, hopefully, touch wood saying this, but hopefully the relegation conversation isn't one that we have to have too many times during this summer, and we're firmly looking up rather than down, and looking further afield than the shores of the United Kingdom as well.
Yeah, well, thanks for that, Martin, because just, we got promoted. I thought we got rid of Coventry City for some time, and you just reminded us there when you said the 3 promoted clubs. We've got Coventry City in the Premier League, but it is a chance maybe for us to put them in their place a couple of times this season. Who knows? But also joining us today, we have Andrew Smithson. Hello, Andrew.
Guten Morgen. And that's it for my translations. You're right, gents.
Yes, Ischnichten Lichten, and all of that. For anyone who used to watch the day-to-day.
Well, you just reminded me of, and it was something funny I saw the other day. It was said the last time Sunderland were in Europe, it was on OV, the same pet. And there is that episode, isn't there, where they go across the border to watch Sunderland play in Belgium, I think it was, isn't it? So,
yeah. So one of them was in the Sunderland top, wasn't he?
Jimmy Neal has a Sunderland scarf on.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. But yeah, Andrew, Martin said something interesting in part one, actually. He said, talking about uncharted territory that we're in, and we are all old enough to remember that Peter Reid era, but I can't actually remember thinking about what's next or making it sustained or anything like that. But where we are now, Andrew, and again, I mentioned it on the pods on the Monday supplement that I did an article way back, actually, when I was talking about Sunderland through the decades, and I worked out that after our relegation, we have an average league position of something like 7th in the second tier since our first relegation. So if you say since the 50s, that's our position. That's our average position in the second tie up in the second tier. This is uncharted territory, and in some senses, it's a little bit scary, isn't it, Andrew? As Sunderland fans, you think, right, you you don't want it all to collapse, and we're thinking about this summer, and we've got a lot of questions. But it is a scary thing when you think, God, where can Sunderland go? We can actually be successful, because you think, actually, if Sunderland do win something, you saw the reaction getting into Europe. Bloody hell! If we won something, it's scary to imagine what might happen.
It is. It's surreal and scary and all of those things, because qualifying for Europe is something I've dreamt of since being a kid. So it is taking a little bit of getting used to, and yet there's also a part of me thinking, well, it was inevitable because the team are a good team. The squad is good and is jam packed full of experience and talent. So the sensible part of my brain is going, yeah, this makes sense. And then the emotional side and the Sunderland supporting side of my brain is going, bloody hell, what's all this about? What happens next? I think when we were younger and we were enjoying the Peter Reid years, there was perhaps just an element of living for the moment. That's just what you did at that age anyway. You perhaps you didn't think too much about what was happening down the line. Whereas, yeah, I'm looking at things from a different perspective, but I'm excited about what happens next. There is going to have to be a mindset. There's all these things now about, somebody mentioned to me yesterday, oh, we might bring out an additional kit for the Europa League. And how do we get allocations for away games? And how can we afford going to Europe and that? So already there's a part of me thinking, oh, can I afford all of this? Would it have been better if we finished 10th and didn't have all of these extra things to fork out for?
Yeah.
So there's a lot to start understanding and experiencing. And just quite an interesting point there when you said you'd forgotten about the 3 promoted teams. All 3 of those sides we had kind of League One clashes with. All of these clubs have come up through the levels, and I wonder if those 3 clubs, Ipswich, Hull and Coventry, if their fans are going to have maybe unfair expectations now, because they've looked at Sunderland and thought, well, if they can come up from League One and do all of these things, we should be aiming for the same. So I wonder if their chairmen were all a bit thinking, oh, bloody hell, we could have done with Sunderland getting beat off Chelsea, like just to take the pressure off our backs a bit.
Yeah. It'll be interesting. Hopefully, they might talk to a few Burnley fans and realise it's not quite that easy. You end up being a yo-yo club for about 5 years, like they have. But let's get into it, because, like I said, we've got a few questions on a few individual players to start with, Martin. And the first one brings us in on Michele. Peter Crum sent a message in saying, is Michele our best centre-back? And that combines with Mangla Ram, who says Xhaka was our most important player, Lafayette was our best. Am I crazy, or was Michele number 2 in both categories? Seems his impact is almost overlooked, underrated. Also, the last 3 games have shown he is our best centre-back and needs to play there next year. So lots of praise for Michele, and he's potentially been our best player in 2 positions, hasn't he, this season?
He has, and he's one of those that if you could clone, if you had 2 of them available for selection each week, both of them would probably find the way into the team in different positions, wouldn't they? Because whether he's a centre half or a right back, he does an absolutely astronomical job. It was I was looking at. I know you love looking at social media, Chris. I saw something on social media earlier, and there was a Leeds fan arguing that it's called is it Jaden Bogle, their right wing back, was a far better player than Nordi Mukiele. And all the stats will back it up, and then somebody pulled all the stats out, which completely didn't back the argument up that the Leeds player was better than Sunderland's, which was amusing. But I think he has been sensational. I think he has been absolutely fantastic. And, he's pretty special in a number of ways. As a defender, he's strong, he's fast, he can time tackles brilliantly. He started the season off partner Alderete, didn't he? After he came in. And it was only when Ballard returned from injury after he'd been injured at Burnley that they kind of pushed Mukiele out to right back. And his attacking flair there is brilliant as well. I was a kind of bit of a surprise when you saw him play fullback after seeing him play centre half. He can go bombing up the wing, go past somebody, whip across in. And he's just got it all. He's got everything you'd want in a defender, which, he's got decent pedigree, hasn't he, for that sort of thing. But it's his character, I think, as well, when you combine his character with his footballing attributes, that makes him special. Because he is very much like Xhaka in terms of his desire to win, his will to win, his will to lead, his will to really drag other players up around him. And it's quite funny if you looked at our signings during last summer and you look at Mukiele and his pedigree, you look at Alderete and where he's from, and South America, hard defender, the Getafe, the team he played in last season, had a reputation for being a hard team. You'd kind of expect the character that Mukiele's shown to be the one that Alderete shows, where you're a little bit volatile, a little bit quirky, a little bit kind of on the edge, but a real genuine character and leader. And maybe the more calm thing that we've seen from Alderete on the vast majority of occasions would be more fitting for the sort of profile of Mukiele. But look, I think he's brilliant. As I say, I think if you had two of them, the two would get inside each week. Because you have one at right back and you have one centre half. That's how good he is. The other aspect to it, Trey Humes played an awful lot of football at right back, and the two of them have kept Geertruida out. Now, if Mukiele hadn't been so good, you've got Geertruida playing at right back all season, and who knows what happens there as well. So, the fact that he's been so good, he's kept another international fullback out of the team. And, and it goes for the fee as well. I'm really looking forward to seeing France play in the World Cup, because France must be the best team ever to have existed if the two of them can't get near their World Cup squad.
Yeah, absolutely, especially defensively. But just on that, Andrew, because Martin mentioned him, and it's the question on a lot of people's lips at the minute. Paul Rackstraw has sent in, how much should we be doing now to persuade Geertruida? He said we would need to pay 50 million plus to get a player of his quality. And the deal, I think, was around 18.5 million. I think that was agreed. He was celebrating after the game like he was part of the team and all of that. But, do you think we can persuade him? It seemed like it from his celebrations he wanted to come.
To nick a phrase off somebody, he looked connected with the group still. We all become body language experts at the end of the season with loan players. And was that a wave of goodbye or a wave of thanks as he walked around the pitch? I don't know if we can do anything else to convince him now. If he experienced Sunday and still isn't sure if he wants to sign permanently, I don't know what else would convince you. And this isn't a criticism of him. It sounds like I'm about to have a dig, But if for him playing games more regularly, and there's no guarantees when you move to a club either. Things might happen and you don't break into the side. But if going somewhere where he thinks he has a chance of a starting place means more to him than being part of this crazy journey we're on, we cannot do anything else. Sunday was a day, an occasion for the ages. It was Sunderland at its very, very best. And if he feels he doesn't want to be part of that, good luck to him. He certainly whilst here has been fully part of it. He's loved every minute of it, and he would be welcome with open arms if he does want to join up. I think, given the last few games and the way the season ended, there's a very strong case to suggest that he would be one of our more regular starters. We've had a bizarre final few weeks where, if anything, Ballard's suspension has actually helped us. We were all up in arms about how it happened, but because of it, it's led to him, Hertrude coming in at fullback, and it's led to Mukiele moving back into the centre. And for all of the reasons Martin said, he's been fantastic there. If we are to make one signing this summer, I think it needs to be some sort of Marvel film style evil genius who can clone players and give us another couple of Nordi Mukieles like Martin wished for, because that performance from Mukiele, to me, was what I imagine the likes of Charlie Hurley and Dave Watson were producing. You know, real legends of the club that fans talked about for years after. Mukiele was unreal on Sunday. He was absolutely phenomenal, to the point where I think he could very easily become an all-time great if he continues like this. So there's space there for Hertrude. Probably, though, the decisions have already been made, and if we're not to sign him and if we're not to make it permanent, the plus side to that is, bloody hell, the lad we must have earmarked to spend that money on. He must be pretty good if he's a better option than what we've seen from Hertrude in the last few weeks.
It's going to be interesting, isn't it, on a few levels? So, like, for one, if Ballard was free from suspension and injury free, and we had a big game this weekend, who's he for in defence? Because, I think you'd be hard pressed to drop Hertrude or put Mukiele back to right back. So I think, Chris said that the Ballard suspension helped us in some respects. It's also caused Ballard potentially a big problem, because his place is pretty under threat at the centre of defence if everybody stays. The other thing, there's another couple of bits that pop out for me, right? So we talked about Lebris and how good Lebris is. That's the one thing this season where I kind of think he's got wrong, is his treatment of Gertrude, and especially dropping him after the Newcastle game just didn't seem the right or logical thing to do for me to a player who is evidently a good player. It's not a youngster who's coming through and you want to take them out of the team and put them into the team. We had a number of players like Elborg who played against Newcastle, and then the next league game they weren't inside because there's been such a gap. But Gertrude really deserved to keep his place. He turned in a brilliant performance. So there's that bit to it. The other question which it raises, which you kind of mentioned in terms of who we must have lined up for that right back spot if we're not going to take up the option for him, is you've seen when everyone has been fit, he's like Mukiele out there because he'll bomb forward and overlap, and he's got that engine to go up and down. And Gertrude doesn't have that. So you kind of look at that sort of profile of fullback, and you kind of make the assumption that maybe he wants somebody who is a little bit more adventurous in that final third. But I don't know if you saw the comments that all of the Sunderland players were leaving under his Instagram post on Sunday and Monday. Your Trouser put something, all very nice, and he finished off with saying the end, and people are kind of thinking, well, that means he's off. But you had Luke O'Nien, Brian Brobby, Granit Xhaka, I think, and a few other players all making comments saying, sign, when are you going to sign? Contract, little emoji and all this sort of stuff. So, if they're leaving those sort of comments, and again, I'm making an assumption here, if he was definitely leaving, he would have said his goodbyes in the changing room after the game on Sunday, because it would have been, loved it, lads, all the best, I'm off. The fact that they're saying, get that thing signed, suggests to me, and I might be erring on the side of hope rather than the side of reality, but it suggests to me that there might still be something to be done there, and it might not be as clear cut as we thought it probably was a month ago.
Yeah. Well, my tinfoil hat theory was that the way he celebrated when it was confirmed we were in Europe suggested to me that there's potential there was a conversation that had gone on and said, almost proof in these last few games, you're in, and if we qualify for Europe, we're going to need you. We're going to need that depth. 18.5 million or whatever it is a snip for a player like that. So you'll be joining. And if you think the way the Premier League is, he probably wouldn't get any better wages anywhere in Europe. So he would need to probably join another Premier League club if he wanted the money that we're probably paying him. So maybe all of that into the mix. Maybe I've just got my tinfoil hat skewed a bit and it's not quite on properly, but who knows? We will wait and see on that one. But I do think that's a very good time for us to take a quick break. So we'll be back after these. And welcome back to How in the Podcast. And we're about to get on to transfers, but these two won't start gassing and go on for far too long, and we can't get through all of the questions as usual. But Martin, I'm going to put this one to you because we are organising at the moment our kind of end of season awards, which at the moment with the scheduling, I'll put my teeth in properly there, you might not be able to make, Martin. So I'm going to put this one to you because Ryan Evans says, first off, thanks for doing the show. Well, thank you very much for listening, Ryan. For most of us, you talk us off the ledge more than once. And congratulations on such a great show and doing this Q&A. I genuinely didn't realise he went on about us for that long. I was just reading it. I thought it was just the first bit. But thank you very much, Ryan. He said, two-part question. Is Enzo a fair player of the year? And he also says, besides Diallo, who do you want in for the Europe run? Well, we'll come on to the transfers bit. But just to give your opportunity, Martin, in terms of player of the year, he's asking Enzo Lefebvre, who would be your player of the year?
I've said a few times on this pod, I reckon Enzo Lefebvre is the best player I've ever seen play for us. I think he's had a magnificent season. I think he's grown in impact as well throughout the course of the season. You consider at the start of the year, he wasn't even in the side, was he, when he kicked off the season against West Ham? And I'm going to say something that sounds contradictory, but it's not. Well, I don't think it is. I reckon Enzo Lefebvre has been our best individual player, but Granit Xhaka would be my player of the season because of the leadership he has shown on the field and what he's contributed to the team as well as his football. And look, that's not to say Enzo doesn't do all that sort of stuff. I think he's fantastic. I think Enzo's a real leader as well. He gets back and tackles, he creates things, he does everything, man. He even shoots webs out of his hand, doesn't he, as we saw at Everton. He can literally do it all apart from penalties. But look, I think just the impact Xhaka's had all season. He's dragged us through some games. He's set the standards off the pitch and on the pitch. And I just think the combination of what he brings footballing-wise and personality-wise has been absolutely fundamental to what we've achieved this season. So I would say Xhaka, but look, you can make a really strong case, and I kind of already have done for Lafayette being player of the season as well. So be a very close call.
Yeah, and I'm not going to ask Andrew about that because Andrew is at the moment scheduled to talk on that end of season awards pod. So we'll refrain from getting Andrew involved in that because you will hear that on a future pod. And thanks to Lou as well. He also sent in a question about Enzo Lafayette, saying we all know Enzo Lafayette is a good player, but he asked if we're surprised how much he's come on this year, and the fact he's a very strong contender for Player of the Year. But moving on, actually, Andrew, we've got an interesting one from Joe Braun, and I'm going to tie it in with, because we're slowly starting to get into what might happen this summer. But Joe Braun asks Andrew, he says, is sending Mark Guiu back the best thing that ever happened? But I mean, you can comment on that, obviously. But I think the fact that, that is a question tells you a lot that we might have plans for this summer and we might talk about needing X, Y, and Z. But the thing is, in the transfer market, sometimes something opens up or something even closes down in terms of Mark Guiu, and he ends up going back that we didn't think would happen. Brian Brobby doesn't come in because of finances and shuffling around the squad. These things happen on a whim sometimes in deals like the Traore one. I think that only maybe happened because we thought we had to go for Brobby and Traore was available. Sometimes we might have a list of players and it doesn't work out like that, or it might work out better for worse just because of circumstance.
Yeah, exactly. There's always going to be these elements in any deal that does or doesn't happen, and the Guiu one was a little bit peculiar. The fact that we were so fleet-footed and able to respond so well, though, isn't by chance. We were able to then move on to Brobby quickly because we'd scouted him. We'd identified that he had the skills we needed, but we'd also been sensible with our money. Had we just gone and lashed out a few million extra on all of the players we'd signed before, or maybe bought a player just to get it done, you then can't be so swift to move things around and make the Broby deal happen. So it's amazing that Sunderland are in this position. And again, as we go on to talk about transfers, we'll talk about financial restrictions and what have you. I don't think there's much panic on terms of the club's front on that score, because we've been sensible with finances to get us to a position that now when the money's serious, there's room there to do things. So, yeah, it probably was quite an important thing that we were able to allow a lone player to go back. I dread to think what would have happened to Sunderland in the past. Although we kind of had examples in it's slightly different. But do you remember when Lewis Grabban got recalled by Bournemouth? He'd been on loan for half a season. It was meant to be a season-long loan. He was one of the few players who'd done well. I think he still finished top scorer despite not playing for the last 4 months.
I think McGeady was really happy with it from memory as well, wasn't he?
Oh, was there I can't remember that. I mean, these are dark days. We don't need.
Didn't he mention it on Sunderland Till I Die? Or was that me making that up?
No, I think you're right now.
I'm sure he had a bit of a pop at the fact we didn't at least try and get him to stay or something like that.
Well, yeah, that does ring a bell. And Sunderland Till I Die would be much better to rewatch now that we know that the club got out of that situation. It wasn't as fun watching it at the time. But yeah, just stuff like that would just leave the whole squad in a mess, and you're in a bad place as a club if one lone player departing scuppers you. Whereas we dealt with the blow remarkably and responded fantastically. Also, I think it put us in good stead with Chelsea. And that type of behaviour and conducting ourselves in that way just means that if we are talking about a lone player this summer, clubs might be more inclined to think, hey, well, listen, Sunderland are going to do right and try and, make things work for everybody. We're more inclined to do business with them. So it did speak a lot about the club's dealings.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Martin, Roy the Roke has sent something in saying, and this is overall, we've got lots asking about to go into detail about what we're going to do. But just general terms to start us off with, Martin, Roy the Roke says, the obvious question is what happens with our recruitment now? He says we need to avoid doing a Forest whilst holding to the ambition of being a top 10 side. So could it be another busy summer? Now, there's a couple of things that might go into this. I remember talking to Kieran Maguire, and he said he was talking to the Brighton owner, and he was saying that the underlying data the season before was saying that Forest were completely out of sync with where they should be in the league, and he was fully expecting Forest to struggle this season, which they did. Now, there's been a lot being made that we were bottom of the XG charts. I don't know how much we need Johnny to say how important they are on the pod. But that's what a lot of people have been saying in terms of our underlying data. So do you think that's going to come into the conversation in our recruitment team, that they're looking at that and saying, well, that's the obvious one, and we because that data tells us we're maybe not quite where our league position's telling us we need to look at that. And do you think the club needs to deal with expectation in terms of it not being the same as last summer?
Yeah, I think Johnny likes XA as well as XG, doesn't he? Johnny loves his X's.
And XXX as well after the podcast.
Oh, yes, indeed. Yes, less said about that on this one, the better. Look, there's a few bits in this, isn't there? So there's the XG conversation, and more broadly that underlying data stuff. And it amused me as well that if the table was XG, then Hull would have got relegated from the Championship.
Yeah.
So you can decide how much store you want to put alongside XG with that as well. I go back to Register Briss's comment about XG when he was asked about it. He said, we've got our own data, our own metrics that we look at, and they're the things that we base our modelling on, our signings on, and all that sort of stuff, and how we're assessing how we're playing. And there is a part of me as well that thinks over the past few weeks we've seen more of what Briss wants to see next season. And Enzo Lefebvre referenced in the interview he did after the Chelsea game, he was asked about when the preparations start for next season. And he said, "Oh, they started 3 or 4 weeks ago on the field." And I think you look at the Man United game, you look at the Everton game, you look at the Chelsea game especially, and put the Wolves game into there as well until we got reduced to 10 men, because we'd started that game off pretty well. And I think we saw a more expansive style of play. We saw more of a willingness to attack, or a desire to attack. And, you've got the confidence in the defence that they can keep the opposition at bay. And there's so many factors that have gone into this season that make it unique in terms of the need to get off to a good start, where we probably were a bit more defensive and pragmatic and grinding results out to try to get some points on the board. You start seeing some better performances, some more expansive performances. And we had AFCON. We had the knock-on effect from that, injuries. It was only in the last month or two that we actually had a relatively fully fit squad to select from after that 3-week international break in April. So you've got that bit about the underlying data for everything, which I kind of think I'm not completely writing it off, but it's like there's reasons for it at certain points of the season, and you can kind of caveat it a little bit. So I'm not too concerned with that bit. And what were the other bits you asked about? Because
He says,
completely
could it be
forgotten.
another busy summer? And my point is that maybe the club needs to dampen expectations if people are expecting a summer like last year.
Look, I think it won't be far off, to be honest, in terms of transfer activity. You know, you've got these new spending rules in which, you know, the one slight negative, I guess, if you're gonna have a negative about finishing in a European position, the slight negative of that is that we are restricted to spending 70% of what the club is projected to bring in next season, compared to 85% if you're in the Premier League. So our capacity for spending is potentially reduced, but then you look at the additional income that comes from being in the Europa League, the additional sponsorship, etc. you can get. So that 70% of being in Europe might equate to 85% of being in the Premier League. So you might not be too far off. The interesting thing with that is obviously the income also brings in player sales, takes into account player sales. Now, if you look at what we've done over the past however many years since Kira Louis-Dreyfus came in, and obviously Christian Speaking was there, and Gisolfi came in the summer, we haven't been afraid to sell players at their selling peak, or what we perceive as their selling peak. So you look at Ross Stewart, you look at Jack Clark, you look at Joe Bellingham last summer. Now, I'm sure in some alternate universe, the club might have wanted to keep Joe, but if Joe had said after promotion, "Oh, I'd love to stay here for another season," the club probably wouldn't have said, "No, on your bike, we're going to cash in on you." Similarly to Jack Clark, if Jack Clark didn't want that move to Ipswich, we might not have sold him and Ross Stewart, but it was kind of right for both sides. It'd be really interesting to see the offers that we get for players during this summer, because there will be interest. And, you know, that's got to be treated as a good thing, because we've had so many seasons where we haven't been able to give away our players, never mind fending off bids from, you know, the elite of European competition for them. So there will be some decisions to make, and some of the decisions might be, well, we can cash in on Siddiqui, for example. We can make a 30 million quid profit on him in a season, because we've got this other lad who's 24 million who we can sign, who we actually think is better. And, you know, you go back to the Mark Guiu thing that we were just talking about, and this kind of shows where we were at as a club, because if you remember rightly, we tried to get Robbie in during the summer, and he hadn't been too sure. Might give it a little bit, see, I'm not sure it's the right move. So we got Guiu instead, and he's somebody who I wouldn't be surprised if we went back in for, because as a club, we've got a bit of a history over the recent years of keeping tabs on players and wanting back in. I know the club really thought quite highly of him as a footballer and as a person when he was here, apparently. But to putting that to one side, the fact that we got Guiu in was because we couldn't get Robbie in the first place. He went back because of the start that we'd made and the other transfer business we'd done. Robbie was like, "Oh, go on, and it looks pretty good now." So he came in. Now, imagine the conversation that we'd had last summer. The players that we tried to get last summer, who maybe I'll wait for a season. I'll give it a few months, see what goes on. Those conversations with those players now are a completely different proposition, aren't they? So there's a potential for quite a bit of transfer activity. You've got to factor in as well. There'll be some players like Simon Dingra came in, didn't quite cut the mustard for Lebris and was shipped out during January. There'll be other players that we brought in who Lebris is going, can I hang my hat on them for 38 games in the Premier League next season? Can I hang my hat on them for 25 games in the Premier League next season? You know, we've seen chop and change on the left wing. Will there be a temptation to bring more experienced players in there, or a greater certainty of performance in there? Whether we actually sacrifice players for that, because the extra games in Europe is probably a different story as if we hadn't finished in Europe. if you're only dealing with domestic competitions, you might be more inclined to let a few players go. The other bit too, as well as the younger players coming through the academy, and I know there's a couple of players who people are quite highly rating in the under 21s, I think it is now. And Andrew, you'll have a far better idea on this than I do, but the European competition gives them a chance to be around more squads, gives them a chance to play in the League Cup, for example. And I think those players coming through the academy, we're going to start needing to develop them more with the new rules and selling them on for bigger prices or getting them into the first team, because there's more pressure on clubs to do that. So, look, I think it is going to be a busy summer. I think it was 14 that we got in last summer, wasn't it? I don't think we'll get that into double figures, but I wouldn't be surprised if we were approaching double figures. And some of them might be to hang around the first team for a season or two before we bring them in to play regularly. Other players, I think, I'm sure, will probably bring in 3 or 4 people who the manager expects to start on the first game of next season.
Yeah. Well, on that, we've had a lot of questions coming in. One from Elliot, one from Lack, one from Joe Lewins, John Briggs. A lot of questions, Andrew, about how many we think we'll bring in this summer compared to last season. Martin's just said 14 in total, 13. I think if you take out Guiu, I think was the final tally. But a lot of people saying 7 quality buys, and they're listing positions. They're saying a centre half, a left back, a right winger, a striker, a defensive midfielder. If you had to guess now, Andrew, how many would you say that we'll end up bringing in when we get to the end of the summer? And what would be at the top of your priority list in terms of positions?
Oh, numbers wise, I honestly don't know. I'm not even sure I could hazard a guess, because I don't think the club will have a target in terms of numbers. I think there'll be several players on a list who, if they suddenly become available, will go for. I don't think they'll just say, right, we need 5 players, and then they sign 5 players and then that's it. I think they're going to be a bit more open-minded. I tell you what, I bet you Louis Dreyfus and that lot are thinking, bloody hell, this lot of fans don't half want the pound of flesh. We've just given them Europa League, and now within days, I'm getting requests for 9 or 10 players or whatever. Oh, boys, just enjoy what you've had. Yeah, I think numbers wise, I honestly don't see the club being that specific. If they can only get 3, for argument's sake, of the players they need, they'll just stick with 3. And if suddenly there's 10 deals that they can do and they improve things, and maybe players that you and I think are guarantees for next season, they might suddenly find themselves out on the rear. The club's transfer dealings are very fluid, and I think it's important that they don't force themselves down certain avenues just to fulfill preconceived ideas. They'll have a much more pragmatic approach to it. As for positions, I think defensively, certainly if Hertruda happens, we are pretty much there. Ballard was on crutches. I don't think we've seen any explanation for that. So we have to assume it was a minor operation he's gone under or whatever, and that he'll be ready for next season. If we were to do anything defensively, I'm assuming it might be a little bit of left back depth. Ronaldo, dear me. There's some positive thinking. We're going to
It'd be a good signing.
We're
Start
going to
some rumours there, mate.
Ronaldo, I've gone all season without making that mistake, and now I've gone and done it right at the end. Ronaldo, and I can fully understand it because of the tempo of the game and the temperature. Ronaldo had a dip in the second half where he was hanging. Basically, he was properly on his heels. Now, I don't know if you could even pick it up on the TV. It was perhaps just because of where I sat. I was quite close to him in the second half, and I could see on his face he was blowing. Now, he hung it out. He was very clever. He got a second wind and closed out the game brilliantly. So I'm not having a dig at him. It was actually a sign of what a good professional he is. But if he is now ending up having to play 2 games a week, that might be a bit much for him. I know he's played European football in the past, but that might be an area where we need to pad things out. And the squad in general, there does need a bit more depth brought in. It would have been a very different conversation if we got in the Conference League, because we were all thinking we're just going to be playing teams of like the same standard as the Dog and Duck. And, we were having conversations this time last week about, do you put a few of the kids in? Like, I don't know, maybe even Timothy Pambele was thinking, I might get back into the team at this rate. But because we're in the Europa, and it looks as if it's going to be particularly competitive, I think some of the clubs in there are of a big stature. We are going to have to sign first team ready players. So there is going to have to be some moving and shaking. And definitely the position we all expect to see strengthened is right wing. I would assume that will be an area the club are looking in particularly strong at the moment. Again, had it been Conference League, we could have offered Traore another year and just said, listen, you pick up some of the slack. It's a different ball game now, and we might see somebody established coming in. That's what I imagine is going to happen.
It's interesting you mentioned Traore, actually, because I was going to put this next one to Martin. Paul Rackstraw sent in, does qualifying for Europe change any of the discussions on who we allowed to leave in the summer? We will need more depth. So is there an opportunity now for Sirkin, Traore, or even Dan Neil to get a new deal? It would cost substantially more to replace them with similar quality.
Oh, look, I think Andrew's hit the nail on the head in terms of the European competition that we qualified for. I think qualifying for the Europa League ups the ante massively. Now, is Traore somebody who we want to keep around for another season, potentially? I think Lebris really likes him. The reality is, he's played, 20 minutes since December for us? We haven't been able to get him on the pitch. He hasn't been fit. So, he's been here all season. He's played 12 games. So that's not somebody who you're going to have as a first choice. Might be a great character in the dressing room, great player on the training pitch, great to have as an option on the bench and come in for a game or two, but he's not somebody you're going to build your first or even probably your second choice 11 around, unfortunately. I think, it's interesting when you look at the transfers that we might make in the summer. Like Dennis Sirkin's one who I would love to see stay. I think he's got oodles of potential. He's just a quality football player, and I think he showed that when he came in over the New Year period. I think he performed really, really well, especially considering he'd been out for a hell of a long time early on in the season, hadn't he? Dan Neil, I think's off to Rangers. I read that earlier, so that looks like that's done and dusted. It did cross my mind about Dan Neil, whether there might be some sort of compromise to be reached for him, but I think he's kind of ran his course here. When you look at the squad, right, and you work on the assumption that Hertrauda, Sirkin and Traore will be 3 who leave in the summer, you're already 3 down in terms of players that we need to maintain the same squad depth. And then you look at the goalkeeping position and go, well, if Roofs is injured, if Roofs, again, touch wood, suffered a really serious injury early on in the season, would you hang your hat on elbow going in goal for 3, 4, 5 months? That would cause me sleepless nights. the prospect of it. You might do brilliantly, but I suspect we'll go in for an experienced backup for Roofs. And, whether Elbow gets a loan spell somewhere in the Championship or whatever, I think there'll be a sign in there. So you've got that. You've got, if Hertraud is not staying, you're probably going to try to sign the first choice right back. You look at the centre halves, and you probably sign another centre half to chuck in with Alderete, Ballard, and Mukiele and 09. You probably want another centre half to go into that mix. You might even look for first choice left back, because Reinildo is going to be 33 in January. So again, the volume of games that we're going to have, and if you want to keep progressing, that could very well be an option. We desperately need somebody to step in for Xhaka as a similar type, if you can find a similar type of player to Xhaka, who can do that more defensive midfield role. You desperately need somebody there. We suffered this season from not having somebody like that. Both wings, I think, are crying out for a first choice signing. Now, whether Angulo's done enough in the last few games to prove that he is the player who we want on the left wing every single week next season, or there's opportunity to sign somebody who will step in and deliver some more goals and deliver some more attacking threat. Right wing, as we've talked about, absolutely nailed on. Striker, is there an argument if Isidore leaves? Well, we'll definitely need somebody else in. Is there an argument for somebody else there regardless? So you kind of start picking through it and you think, well, actually, there could be a need for a number of positions. But I think what we've seen, and this is why it's so hard to actually speculate. I think Andrew touched upon it earlier. What we know from what we've seen over the past few seasons, if there comes an opportunity to improve on the field or off the field, the club will take it, regardless of who the upset. Lebris, we talked about Lebris previously. He is not afraid to make big decisions about players. He's ruthless. And I think as a club, we've shown that. We've got rid of players that you think, oh, shit, I would have given him another year. And there's just Patrick Roberts, for example. He could have been quite useful for us at times this season, but now he's not the level that we want or what we aspire to be. Let's move on and get somebody else in. So I think there's very few positions actually in the team where you go hand on heart with all certainty they will be in the starting 11 come August. Now, 9, 10, 11 might be. But if there's an opportunity to upgrade and improve, if there's an opportunity to actually cash in at peak value from a business perspective, the club will take that as well. So it's such an interesting conversation. It's a difficult conversation to have with any real kind of insight because we just know how the club operates. And, it'll all emerge over the next few weeks and the next couple of months, but it's going to be fascinating to see how we tackle it. Because being in the Europa League adds a different dimension to recruitment possibilities as well as the approach to the recruitment that we undertake.
Yeah. And this conversation will definitely go on, not only because of the fact that these two have talked so much that we've got a ton of questions we haven't got through, which will go onto a list and we will roll over and come on to them. So again, thank you to everyone who was sending questions, and apologies to those who we didn't get around to, but we will carry them over and because they're all still relevant, and the conversation that Martin just mentioned there will keep rolling on for a number of weeks. Just a couple of very last quick ones to finish us off with. Michael Conroy said, can we have a shout out for This Is Weeside? They have slogged all season and deserve a pat on the back. So there's a pat on the back for them. Last one for you two, and I'm gonna just let you shout up because I'm gonna start from the off and say I haven't got a clue. I used to back in the day. If you asked a 12-year-old me how the UEFA Cup worked, I could have told you. But LD sent in and said, explain to everyone how the Europa League group stages work. Also, please explain how UEFA coefficient and the qualifying rounds work. I fancy a laugh over an extremely complex matter. So I'll hand it to you two, either of you to jump in because, like I said, I have not got the first clue.
Chris, you can't complain that me and Martin talk too much and then ask us to explain the UEFA competition. Basically, the format is Sunderland are class. We're going to win every game and we're going to get to the final. Keep it as simple as that.
Sure.
Do you know, Martin? Do you know the set?
Well, I have. I can't tell you I'm going to give a really comprehensive and true answer, but I have been looking into it, and there's all sorts of qualifying rounds happening, and we've bypassed that. We've qualified automatically for the league phase, of which there's 36 teams in that league phase, and I think then you get 16 teams from those 36 going into the knockout phases. So you however many 6 leagues of 6, there's 16 teams qualifying from those into the round of 16. Oh, you got I don't know. It was 32.
I think that
I was trying to think that shouldn't work.
we get
No, it doesn't.
8 games, 2 teams from each pot, 4 home, 4 away. If you finish
It's one big league, isn't it?
Yeah, and if you finish in the top 8, you automatically go through to the knockout stage. If you're 7th to 20-something, you then have a playoff to go into the knockout stage. And where you are in that table determines if you play one of the stronger sides or the weaker sides. So I think it does benefit you to finish as high up as the league as possible, I think, doesn't it?
Well, it's normally the case, isn't it?
Yeah.
I was looking at a whole diagram, this convoluted diagram, and it had the teams in, but it must be the pots that they're in rather than league. I assume they were leagues. You see, you played in. But I have just Googled it now. So you've got the league phase of 36 teams. The 16 teams ranked from 9th to 24th from the league phase have a knockout phase playoffs.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then the 8 teams ranked 1st to 8th from the league phase, and the 8 knockout phase winners go into the round of 16.
Yes. See, clear.
There you go.
I don't know where the confusion is. Straightforward.
As clear as mud. I just want to say thank you to LD for giving me that laugh of these 2 intelligent blokes trying to work out how it all put. Whatever happened in knockout football, honestly.
But
when you have
8 games, we play 8 games, and then you go into knockouts.
The thing
minimum.
The thing is, had it been knockout football, you could have seen what was going to happen. Sunderland were going to draw a team from Wales or Scotland. None of us get to go abroad. We get knocked out, and that's the end of it. So at least by going into this group stage effort, we're going to have a bit of an adventure.
Well, that's it. We could have been dancing in the streets of Total Network Solutions. But anyway, we've run over as usual. So just leaving to say thank you very much, Andrew and Martin, as always. Fantastic stuff. And thank you for making the Europa League very clear, so we all now know what is happening, I think. But also, thank you again for sending your questions in. Again, we'll get round to those who we missed off this time. Thanks again for listening. Thanks again for listening throughout this season. And don't forget, we're here every day throughout the summer. I don't know why we're putting ourselves through this again, but we will be here every single day throughout the summer because there's, of course, going to be loads going on Sunderland-wise, and we've got millions to talk about, and we're just all excited about what's going on. And then we'll be excited about the actual things that are going on when we start delving into the transfer market. So look out for all of that. But from us, it's bye for now.